We are hearing on the call from Mark Zuckerberg now, frankly, taking on Jack Dorsey of Twitter and taking on this issue of political ads. He says that he is opening up the call. He wants to talk about principles, and that while it doesn't, impact his business, all of this controversy is creating a lot of these headline risks, so to speak. Even though political ads don't make up a big portion of Facebook's business, I wonder how much of these headlines are actually really starting to distract the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I was feeling very strongly about coming out of the past week's news about political advertising on Facebook. This is taking a lot of attention away from running the core business. This is like taking a lot of mind share away from for the major executives to have to defend their practices. This is clearly something that, even though it doesn't account for a lot of Facebook's ad revenue, is counting for a lot of mind share across the company, and that is concerning to me.
And Lee, your take, given how notable this has been in the analyst call, so before we dig into the numbers, your take on political ads and sort of the outsized influence this is having on the company, especially from the regulator standpoint.
Yeah, so I believe the political ads are about 0.8% of their revenue. And I think the bigger thing here is less that revenue, which, look, personally, I think it would make sense for Zuck to throw that by the wayside, as you can see Jack is over at Twitter. Although the interesting part about the subtweet that Jack is basically making of Zuck here is that you can't really target people on Twitter as well as you can target them on Facebook. So there's an interesting dichotomy there. But at the end of the day, I think what's a little bit more interesting is actually that we haven't actually seen a hit to the bottom line that Zuck had kind of, alluded to, associated with the spending that he was going to do to secure the platform. And there was all sorts of worry from the analyst community and on the buy side that the business itself of Facebook would be encumbered by all the money that they had to spend, but that hasn't really materialized at the end of the day, and the business is still on fire here. I mean, they're pushing just as much to the bottom line as they basically ever have been, and the user numbers continue to be good. They did miss our ARPU number on the Estimized platform by a little bit, which was a little strange given that the revenue number was such a big beat. So that's something that we'll watch out for. But Instagram is on fire here, and at the end of the day, it would just make a lot of sense for him to throw that by the wayside and move on.
Well, he is coming out and saying that if our goal was to make either side happy, I'm pretty sure we're doing a bad job because everyone is frustrated with us. That might be the quote of the day from Mr. Mark Zuckerberg. So, Debra, let me bring you back in here because we fold in the political ads into the fundamentals of the business. You had a beat on the margins, on the operating income, and a beat on the bottom line. Are they really doing enough to spend to clean up that platform? And if they were, shouldn't those margins come in a little bit lower?
Yeah, you know what? It's in one hand, you could say Facebook could never spend enough to clean up its platform. There's clearly a lot of cleanup to do, and there's no question that it is spending a lot of money. The more it can throw at this, I think the better. But at the same time, the revenue continues to rise. The user base continues to rise. These are issues that Facebook hasn't had to worry about for several quarters now. They're the more boring stories, quite frankly, about a company like Facebook. I mean, you think of some companies and you worry that revenue or user growth isn't going to match up, and that's the big story going into earnings. But here, the big story isn't revenue or earning or user growth. It's these other big overhanging issues. And I agree. I think the more that Facebook could spend and the more that it can say that to appease the many critics it has, the better it's going to be over time. But for now, the revenue and the user growth is looking just fine.
Lee, of all the good things, sometimes what is news is what is not said. And notably, Libra has not been talked about on the call yet so far. Is that news in and of itself because we're not talking about it?
Yeah, like this thing feels a bit dead. I'd never want to go on the record and say it's completely dead because, who knows what happens in the future. But I think the interesting thing with this is that when we look at the past for Facebook, it is their ability to basically lock people in with different aspects of identity that has kept them on the platform. So single sign-on was such a massive thing for Facebook, and I think Zuck's strategic approach here with Libra was, again, if you can lock them into this currency, you can keep them, you can keep their identity and keep them in all of your, in all of your platforms, and keep all of the data, the personal data flowing to the marketing machine. And so I think when we look out 2, 3, 4 years, that was a big strategic driver. I don't think anybody really discounted it into the price, but if you look out, again, 2, 3, 4 years, where is the growth continuing to come from? They're going to have to find another acquisition or another something to keep people kind of, in the walled garden. And this doesn't seem to be what it's going to be. And they would be talking about it more, I think, if they really felt like it was going to be the future.